my guest, James C. Horak. James, hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Dave. Pretty good. And you?
Not bad for an old man at all. Not bad at all.
Don't those wolves keep you young?
Well, they try to. But I was going to say that was a very interesting show you did last evening with Randy Mohans.
Well, thank you. He always makes it interesting.
I promise I'll try. We had an interesting discussion this morning about many topics. But I have a question to ask you. What did you sense doing the 12-12-12, whatever it was?
You mean what's coming?
No, what did you experience yesterday? And what's the difference between yesterday and today for you?
Clear sky.
We're raining.
Well, I sense changes, and they're going to be more discernible the closer we get to the 21st. But I know that there is a lot of concern among the powers that be to cloud this issue, maybe even have a false flag or two. But let's hope that they don't put it in full drive and let us have our moment. Well, I'm very hopeful that things are going to come off the way they should, and that we'll have this planetary alignment and benefit from it.
I agree with that, but I've noticed since yesterday, particularly when I woke up this morning, that I have a calmness about me that I did not have yesterday, and I have a different understanding, a more thorough, in-depth understanding of many things that many of my hosts have talked about.
It's going to happen differently for everyone, but we're all going to notice the difference.
I asked that question in a chat room, and some of the answers I got. What's everyone experienced since yesterday? And one guy says, I feel differently. The other one says, I experienced love help arriving in the form of his girlfriend helping him start to pack. Andrew says, awake and asleep, it's the same thing. The days move very fast and the nights even faster. Connected deep into heart hive mind doing the fire ceremony today. Just, all kinds of interesting answers like that. Like I feel very relieved and grounded with connecting with Soul Family today.
Well, these are the things that we'll have a greater and greater ability to perceive, to realize community, instead of thinking about each of ourselves being units. But to realize community is the height of existence, because the individual is a lonely figure without company. We're gregarious, just like your wolves, and we thrive in company with others. The old saying that no man is an island, well, that's true. And everyone that I've ever known that has become reclusive does it in sadness. So we're getting out of this mold, and we'll find alternatives and be able to focus on them in ways we might not have imagined before. It's all going to be part of it, and it's what we make of it.
And that was my K9 saying hi, James.
Well, hello. What's his name?
That was Runt and Spirit.
Well, tell him hello for me.
I will tell them that. Oh, you can't imagine the difference I've noticed in my canines. They are calm. I noticed that there's an alertness about them I've never seen before.
Well, the power of expectation, like I talked about last night, is a very powerful thing. And when we have something to look forward to, and we prepare for it, and we're inviting it into ourselves. And this is what this can be amplified by. I'm just laying down the welcome mat for it in hopes that other people will do the same. It's hard to get it across to people that haven't ever imagined anything like this, that it could have impact, that it could be something that could bring about change, could inspire change. That's exactly what it is. It happens so seldom that no written history exists to give us an idea clearly. We have it in legend, we have it in myth, and anyone will tell you, if they're an anthropologist, archaeologist, or historian, that there's always something to these legends, something real. They may have changed, they may have permutated many ways, they may have become dramatized and lost a lot of their truth, but there was something to begin with. And what we have here is an astronomical configuration that will be a long, long time before anyone else experiences it. And that's what we need to think about. We need to think about this as a gift and to celebrate it and welcome it with no fear. No fear at all. Fear blots out the senses and destroys clarity.
And that's exactly what everything they do is to generate fear among people. But yes, I have a personal favor to ask of you.
Sure.
I have many people here tonight who have never heard of James C. Horak. Can you believe that?
Oh, yes. I can imagine. I'm surprised when I run into somebody and introduce myself, like what happened a few weeks ago, and they say, yeah, I have heard of you. I mean, I'm surprised at that. So I'm not surprised at people never hearing of me because I'm not announced among my more famous colleagues, if you've noticed.
Yeah, I've noticed that. This is the only radio station in the world I know that's built around canines.
Well, there are worse things to build a radio station around, for sure.
You know, like we were talking about the truth this morning, and what did we say about the truth?
It's the only way to obtain clarity. You deviate from the truth, and whatever you may think that you have or own as clarity is, well, it's self-deception. You have to have truth, and you have to have a perspective that is based on truth. And those things don't necessarily always go together. You see a lot of people that have truth, but they don't research, they don't penetrate. The truth that they have is kept like a miser putting the talents in the garden, remember?
Absolutely.
And you see a lot of people like that. They go so far, and they think that this truth that hasn't been connected to anything significant is a laurel.
You know, it's interesting when you take a look at what the truth is. A person can have a truth that they know in their heart is the truth. They've researched it, they've experienced it, they know it inside and out. You can have a listener out there that can totally disagree with that, so that makes the speaker wrong. It's all a matter about perceived perception, I believe it's called.
Usually when there's a disagreement, one or the other or both will have a prejudice. And they may hide that prejudice very carefully. But if you get in a debate, and debates are the thing to do. If you really want to get down to brass tacks and you listen to these people explain why they feel this way or why they see things this way, and they'll tell you, and they may not intentionally tell you, but they'll tell you if it goes on long enough. A lot of people that are afraid of debate, they will avoid it by getting nasty or by making accusations or just whatever because they're not trained in debate. And I'm not talking about formal debate. I'm just talking about people being civil and discussing their differences with another person in a civil manner and having some faith in the principle of persuasion. Because if you can debate well and you have a good, strong point, at least you can bring a person around to understand why you see it that way. Not necessarily, persuade them into seeing it the same way, but earn their respect. And that is a big step in the right direction. But don't ever be afraid of debate, because the two people extending courtesy and decency to each other who have different points of view can often meet in the middle. And I'm not talking about compromising principle like politicos do, or compromising essential, necessary guidelines that they philosophically represent on the basis of integrity like they do. I'm talking about just understandings that can differ in interpretation and sometimes even differ in the way we imagine how they are true or they're not true. But we can all meet at some point if we sustain a knowledge base and we penetrate with research. We'll find that we meet closer and closer and closer. You've heard about remote viewing.
Oh, yes. I'm quite familiar with that.
One of the things that I have argued about remote viewing that I differ with remote viewers who have been trained by the military. Remote viewing is very similar. You heard me talk about divining pendulums and divining rocks and what they represent. They are a way for the subconscious to get something across to the conscious mind. It's almost a focal point that both can come together on. Rarely can you, but it's a device that allows that. And the subconscious mind doesn't miss a thing. It's very powerful. It's perfect. It can sense things. It can also build a vision of reality based on inevitability, because it's the closest thing to genetic knowledge that you can have. Conscious mind doesn't want to hear any of that. So remote viewing is based on going after a target cold. And that's like saying knowledge doesn't count. If you give a remote viewer the knowledge that you have about the target, and you do training with the expectation that he's got to go blind, but you go the other way, then he will succeed a great deal more. And the reason, I think, and I've never had any remote viewing training. I understand the principle. I've read about it, but I've never been trained as a remote viewer. But the reason I think that the military trains these people to do it and they mimic this is because they want to limit the knowledge of the remote viewer so that they can maintain their security. They want him to give them clues, but they don't want him to have the overview. It's just like when you're working for a company that has a government contract and that you're working on a top security project. You compartmentalize the jobs, the work. Even with brilliant minds you do this because you don't want anyone to have the overview very few are privileged to have. So you give them jobs, tasks here and there, and there's no picture for them to put together, so there's no security risk. That's why I think they treat the remote viewer that way. But this idea that if you give them knowledge, then this ability won't kick in, I don't go along with that at all. As far as I'm concerned, no matter what the task is, knowledge isn't going to hurt. It's going to help you achieve better results.
Thank you. And when you take a look at what they're teaching now in kindergarten, grade school, high school, and college, they're teaching fiction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dave, have you seen one of those syllabuses that they give teachers at the beginning of each year? And they do it in grade school, they do it in junior high, and they do it in high school.
No, sir, I haven't.
And they will fire a teacher if he doesn't follow or she doesn't follow it.
I know.
They'll fire them. There's no room for imagination or creativity. You have people that would be the most splendid teachers on the planet because they inspire the student to want to learn instead of making learning a chore. The whole attitude of the public school system is to tone down the student and make learning drudge, to deny them excitement of finding out about things from the value of finding out about them. And one of the examples that I use for that, imagine a child that has a video game. And in order to target this tank in this video game, that child has to figure out where that tank is going to be when that shell hits. So he's got to employ trigonometry and plane geometry, right?
Right.
How fast do you think that kid, and we're talking about a 5 or 6 year old, how fast do you think that kid's going to learn math? It's going to be instantaneous because it's exciting. All of a sudden, he wants to hit that tank, but he's got to figure out how to sight it in and adjust it to the speed of the tank, the distance of the tank. You got 3 unknowns, and if you know 2, you have algebraic equation. If you know 1, but you know angles and how to triangulate speed with angles, you have trigonometry. And by the time he's 7 or 8 years old, he knows the trig tables. He's getting interested in solid geometry. So you send him to high school, and the kid's already had college math. It's easy.
Interesting you should mention that. Let me give you an example of what I've found here in beautiful old downtown Pahrump. I have friends here that had a daughter that just recently graduated from high school. A couple years ago, I was in their store, and her daughter was sitting over there working on her advanced calculus homework. and she just couldn't get it. I looked at it and I thought, what the hell are they teaching? So I let her borrow a little book of mine written in 1937. It's about a quarter of an inch thick, and it went from addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all the way through advanced geometry in that little book. And when you read it, you understood it. They took all the mystery out of it then. She's one of these brilliant young children, and she memorized how to do it that way. And she went in and took a test, and they flunked her because she couldn't do the steps. She said, I get the right answer. Why do you penalize me for not getting it because I got the right answer? Well, you didn't do it our way. She says, what difference does it make how you get there as long as you get there? Well, that's our policy.
Well, in geometry, I had geometry as a boy. They make you prove a theorem like the Pythagorean theorem, and you have to show every step that you take to acquire the proof. And I forget how many steps there is to prove the Pythagorean theorem, but it's the same number for everybody. You may not like that, but that's old school too. But now they have the same thing in algebra. They have the same, you have to prove your steps and so forth. If you jump to the answer, they want to know. They may not be the stickler that they are in geometry and algebra, but they still want to know how you did it.
Well, I'm one of those people that my brain works so fast that, I do 3 or 4 steps in one, and I'll put that down and put that down, and I get the answer. And I had a geometry teacher when I was in high school that flunked me. I was talking to my dad about it one night. He said, school board meeting tomorrow night. He said, we'll be there, so will the teacher. So they said, why do you failing Dave? Well, he doesn't know how to do it. They said, does he ever get a wrong answer? He said, not very often. Well, he doesn't do it the way I showed him. So my dad said, put 100 problems on the board. So he got up to problem 25. He said, Dave, go ahead, start with 1. So I did. By the time he got to problem, I think the 37, I was on problem 36. So I let him get up to about, I think it's 75 or 80. Then I went in, and when he got to 100, I was at 100. And they had another teacher there that went through, and he said, Dave didn't miss a problem.
The public school system is not for you. You're one of those people that can do code in your head.
Mm-hmm.
If the military had figured that out with you, you would have gone into a particular program. Communications technician.
Well, I was in a program. It was called Project Talent.
If they knew what you just told me, they would have put you in communications technician. A rather infamous individual was a CT. Some people may not know this, but you know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a communications technician?
And he was standing in the doorway when the guy up the 6th floor shot the president.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with it. He was working for the FBI and the CIA as an informer. He was trained as a double agent. Everything that most people think about him is from half-lies, half-truths. But he was a rather brilliant individual. And he doesn't look like his pictures. He didn't look like his pictures. I've got a picture that I acquired rather in an interesting way of Lee Harvey Oswald and his wife Marina introducing their newborn baby girl to Georges de Mohrenschildt. And that doesn't look like Oswald. Now, because it doesn't look like Oswald, I knew a guy that knew Marina. And he took that photo to her and asked her, is this photo of you and Lee Harvey Oswald and de Mohrenschildt and everything? She said, yeah, I can remember it. And he says, I wanted to ask him, but he had already done me a big favor. I wanted to ask him, why does he look different? And I just didn't do it. But if I ever see the guy again, I will. But it doesn't look the same.
That's like the young fellow who allegedly did the shooting up in Aurora, Colorado. You look at one picture of him that they have from high school, and you look at him now.
Yeah.
Close, but it's not the same person.
I have known at least one person that actually could change their appearance. What they could do is they could impose a psychic block on what you saw. And there are people that can put an audience, a large audience, under simply by using their hands. First time I heard that, I didn't believe it, but since then, I assure you it's true.
That's like I say about politicians. You never watch them when they talk. What you do is look at what they do afterwards. Look at their actions, not what they're trying to tell you. Don't listen to their voice because they lie instinctively.
You know that David Oates is represented as having pioneered reverse speech. David Oates was in Australia, and he was working on reverse speech, and he was approached by the FBI. It said, if you come to the United States, we'll subsidize you. We'll subsidize your research. They brought him over here, and after a while dropped him like a hot potato. A little while later, I went to visit him, and I said, do you really think the FBI gave up on reverse speech? And he said, oh, yeah, they couldn't do it without me. And I said, do you ever see movies or anything? I'd already got him defensive. And he said, no, I don't watch movies or anything. I said, well, if you ever change your mind and you want to wise up about what the FBI is doing with reverse speech these days, see the movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. The movie. Because that movie cannot be interpreted or understood except in the framework of reverse speech.
What was the name of that movie again?
Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. It's a cult classic, and it was made by David Lynch, the American genius. And I'm sure it was made at the behest of the FBI. Before you ask me, let me tell you the way the FBI was so concerned about reverse speech.
Why?
They wanted to find a way to filter it out of speeches lying politicos gave.
Not too successful at it, are they?
They are more successful than people that do reverses? No. One of the rushes to learn how to interface the human mind with a computer, one of the rushes, that was one of the concerns. There's a tell in that movie to indicate to anyone that knows anything about what I'm talking about that they can figure out that reverse speech is the key to interpreting that movie. And that is when this agent is being sent down to Twin Peaks to find this serial killer. And the assistant director's daughter takes him to the airport. She's wearing a red dress with a blue rose pin on it. And when they get there, the agent is then briefed. But he is briefed by the daughter giving him sign language. And the reason for that is obvious. That the assistant director did not want his briefing reversed. It's a tell.
Golly, it is.
It's a tell. That's the key. And that's not the only thing that Lynch has ever done with that in mind. His masterpiece is called Inland Empire. And it'll make the hair stand up on the back of your neck if you know what's going on. But it can't be interpreted without a key, too. And I won't tell you what the key is because it would ruin the movie. And it is his masterpiece. But they were afraid of Lynch. They were afraid of where he could go with his brilliance. So now he's convinced that everything that he does worthwhile is a gift of transcendental meditation. How to turn a brilliant mind to mush.
They certainly try, don't they?
Yeah. I was really shaken when I heard a lecture of his where he gave all the credit for his creativity and everything to transcendental meditation. That just kind of irked me in a big way. But I bring that up because I want to discuss how even though you have some of the most creative minds and brilliant people, they are targeted. They are minimalized. And David Lynch is one of them. You've been minimalized.
I have?
Yep.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, somewhere along the line somebody worried about you and fed you to the machine, didn't they?
Yeah, when I was 6 years old.
Right.
I was hauled off. But I was only there in the summertime. I wasn't there continuous like Duncan O'Finian and I'd say virtually all the other ones. And I've never been able to figure that one out.
Well, another one, you know, I talked about Casey Brennan.
Yeah.
Who...
Yes, I do.
Well, Casey Brennan was one. Do you know who his family friend was that took him under his wing and put him in a program like yours? David Ferry.
Well, that name caused lights to go on behind a closed door.
Oh, yeah. Well, David Ferry was one of the men that was indicted by Jim Garrison for conspiracy to assassinate the president, along with Clay Bertrand Shaw, and I forget who else, but there were three. Clay Bertrand Shaw was head of the International Trade Mart there in New Orleans, very wealthy man. And David Ferry was, when Oswald was in New Orleans, he joined the Civil Air Patrol, and it was headed up by David Ferry, who was a pilot. David Ferry didn't have any hair on his body and drew in his eyebrows and so forth, which is typical of U-2 pilots that fly at 65,000 feet. Which brings us around to where Oswald was stationed at the time that he got his hard luck discharge to go home and take care of his mother. Promptly turns around and gets a passport and visa and goes to the Soviet Union. He's got a top security clearance because he's a communications technician in the Marine Corps. And it is customary when somebody has top security clearance that they go back home and stay there until the intelligence that they have is dated before they ever permitted to leave the country. But not Lee Harvey Oswald, because they were setting him up. And even that was not the whole story, because I've got a picture of Lee Harvey Oswald, who is at the American Embassy in Moscow in the late 50s during a garden party. And obviously he's known by the spook that took the picture, because he's in a crowd of people and only he has his face turned towards the camera. They must have called his name. Well, that's a picture to see, isn't it?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because a year ago, last February, I was interviewed by a friend of mine, Kevin Smith.
Friend of mine, too.
Oh, he is a delight. And
yeah.
We were on there, and he was interviewing me, and we were talking about Lake Vostok. And he opened my eyes to look at, when they make a statement, how did they know that? And boy, has that ever railed with me since then. How did they know that? How do they know that?
Well, they have hit a lot about what's going on there. Over 10 years ago, there was a lady explorer who was hiking to the South Pole, going to set a record. And she got too close to something. And Special Forces picked her up in debriefing for quite some time. So, you know there's a no-fly zone in Antarctica, don't you?
Yeah, and there's mountains in there, and there's valleys that have green grass.
There's a subtropical valley in Antarctica, and the first English printing, first edition of Byrd's account that was published of his second expedition to Antarctica, he tells you the truth. What's in his diary, what's so hidden. They were flying over this valley, and the airplane crew and everybody was abducted and taken to that valley by blondes. And he met with the elder. And the elder told him, said, don't mess with our ecology here. And what did they do? Little America, they decided they would power it with a fission reactor. And the technology wasn't that stable at the time. So they put in a reactor and it was stable. And so that's what caused Operation High Jump.
All right, let me go back a little bit further. In 1942, the Germans allegedly went to Mars, and even earlier went to the South Pole and created a settlement down there. And I want to talk to you what you know about the settlement that the Germans allegedly have at the South Pole.
Well, too much is made of that. For instance, they know that a super submarine left Germany just before the Battle of Berlin, and it was tracked to the Hawaiian Islands, to the northernmost Hawaiian island, which is owned by Firestone. And it is where Lindbergh stayed after he was run out of the United States. They kidnapped his kid, they did this and they did that because Hitler had given him the Knight's Iron Cross. So he took refuge in Firestone, who probably was sympathetic with Hitler. It gave him refuge on that island, and it happens to be a no-fly zone too. But that submarine went there. And I can tell you from personal experience that Himmler didn't die in that bunker. Now, about Hitler, I'm not sure. But I know Himmler didn't, and I don't mind telling you how I know.
And how do you know?
I was going to Michigan State. I had a friend, John Vagley. John Vagley had an interesting past. He was still a young man, but he had had a very large congregation of Seventh-day Adventists there in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And one day he decided that he didn't go along with the teachings of the Seventh-day Adventists, so he decided to get into a political science program at Michigan State. And that's where I met him. We took a speed Russian course over the summer together. And John ended up translating various works of literature into Esperanto from other languages. Well, John was married to Darlene, and I'm staying with John and his family. They had 3 kids, and one of them was a little demon. And so he messes with me, and I chase him, and I run into one of the traps that he's dug and tear my ankle up. So I'm bedridden practically. And Darlene's feeling sorry for me, so she brings in this shoebox. And in that shoebox are all these letters, handwritten. Some of them are dated in the 50s. And she shows me photographs. And the photographs are of Himmler, and there's a little girl on his knee. She says, "That's me. He was my uncle." So those letters were, after I started going through them, they were from Himmler, and they were dated in the 50s, and they were from different places.
Wow. That sure blows a hole in a lot of lies they've told, doesn't it?
Well, I saw Himmler's SS dagger given to him by Hitler. And John turned out to be a spook. But John spent some time with me here in my home. But not anymore, because I always suspected that his trips to France and around the world and everything had more to do with something else than they had with Esperanto. And so John goes to China, and he brings back a girl, Chinese girl, who may be one of the most brilliant geniuses on the planet. And she quickly joins the Navy here. And that's not something that anybody but a spook would do. And I don't mind talking about it because I'm not keeping any more damn secrets.
You know what's interesting about internet radio? You never know where it's going to go. All right.
No, you're not. You don't.
But I have a question that was put in the chat room. What do you think about the process of the equinox? Precession of the equinox, rather.
Well, I think that it's an indicator of whether there's any polar shift or not. There's always some. I mean, it's bound to happen because the things that maintain stability in astral bodies in space change. They change relative to each other. I discussed gravity wave before, and that's a component of gravity that is slighted. It's not in the equation and should be. And it deals with the larger configuration of all the astral bodies in our system. But if you're talking about the balance of the Earth, as far as remaining in a fixed position, it varies just as other things vary because we're in a system that is kept in place artificially.
That's interesting. When I go out at night and look at the stars, I see that Orion's belt is much higher in the sky than I have ever seen it in my entire life.
Dave, I have told people many times to get one of these programs that'll give you a fix of the sky, or at least what the sky should look like on any day, any place on Earth at any time. And I have one, and I've had it for a number of years, Planetarium Gold. But if you use it, like for instance, you put in the time at night so you can see the stars, and you go outside, over a period of 2 weeks, there'll be 3 or 4 nights where the sky is just flat not right.
Last night was one of those nights.
Yeah, sure. You know, I noticed, earlier this week that the moon wasn't tracking right. You know, remember when the moon was about a 30-degree position on the rise with the horizon, and if you watched it and then you got up and look where it was setting, it was going way too far to the south when it was setting.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know that's wrong. And I didn't have to pull up my astronomy gold.
It's interesting. Last night when I was outside, I took a good look at the Big Dipper. Now, when you look at the Dipper, the Big Dipper, on what would be not the handle end, but the other end, 7 times the distance between those two stars is where the North Star is. Well, I looked at that and I said, why is the Big Dipper that high in the sky? So I looked over there and I said, Polaris, you're not where you're supposed to be. The North Star's not where it has been.
No. And the North Star should be probably the most consistent positional reference in the sky there is. I mean, enough so that you can navigate by it. If people doubt what we're saying, or they think that we're a little kooky for saying what we're saying, just get it and share it with other people so they can see for themselves. But you will find anomalies all around you, that something is changing the sky. Now, it could be the Earth. It could be the position of the Earth. It could be a number of other things. It could be that something is going on that's changing time. And that's what I think it is. I don't think time has been right since you detonated the first hydrogen bomb. You ever watch a hydrogen bomb from the detonation when the fireball first forms?
Yes, I have.
Do you see the stars and the constellations in it?
I haven't.
The next time that you get a chance, you watch it. You'll see stars and constellations in it. So what doorway are we opening to where?
Who knows? But I have an idea. We've talked about many things, James, and are you familiar with the Astrolab applied theory of stereoscopic projections? The stars can be measured by simple instruments.
Well, there are many ways of doing it, and that's a good way. It's an accurate way. But you're not that far off if you've got a fix. You follow the sky and you know where the stars are supposed to be and the planets at a particular time. So if you want to know how far off they are, I've never really been concerned about that, just that there are times when the sky isn't right. But a couple of times when I had a 6-inch telescope, and that's a story in itself, too. But I figured out that the migration of the sky was 5 minutes off one time, whenever I set it up and I had everything working that I needed. And I used a method of determining how far off the sky was. It was 5 minutes off. So it wasn't off that much as when you go out, you can tell right away. But not long after that, I sold my telescope.
Well, one morning I went out. I was leaving. I was going to have to run into town. And I looked up, and there's a chemtrail being sprayed, but I couldn't see any aircraft. And the sky was clear.
Yeah.
So I called him and asked him, and he spun his scope around and said, I don't see no plane, but I can see where the exhaust is coming out of the engines, and I can see the chemtrail. He said, but look back about 2 miles behind it. And there was a black object inside the chemtrail following the airplane. So he called another friend of his. So we had a three-way phone conversation going. And he said, yeah, he said, I see the engine exhaust. I see the chemtrail. And what is that black thing in about 2 miles back?
Well, you know, to be able to see these things is high credit, because most people have things going on in front of their noses, but because they don't allow the credulity, they're not prepared to see it. I was with two men one time. We were moving a house full of stuff to a storage. We had picked this stuff up in Louisville, and we were hauling it, and we hit I-20. We were coming west from Dallas to Fort Worth. And in the distance, when we first got on I-20, and it was during the rush hour, so we were on I-20 coming to Fort Worth for 2.5 to almost 3 hours. And all that time, two jets are at about I'd say 35-degree angle with the horizon in the west, frozen in the sky, contrail and all, going straight down. And all the time that we're coming to Fort Worth, they're there, frozen. We get to Fort Worth, and we get out to get a drink. They have a truck that they're driving. I'm driving the car. They get out, and they're going to get something to drink. And I say, well, what do you think about the jets? And they said, what? I said, the jets that were frozen in the air all the time that we were on I-20. And they said, oh, is that what it was? It happens all the time. And I have been with people that I swear would not see something like that unless I start describing it for them. Then I break their psychic block, and they see it. And that's common. I mean, there's stuff in the western sky here. If I go out, say about 30 minutes before the light starts to change, late in the day, and I look over in the west, if I do that 3 or 4 times a week, I invariably will see an anomaly like that, or even more amazing. I've got some timed exposures that cover about 2 hours. One of these planes going straight down through some cumulostratus clouds that no wind, so they're a perfect frame of reference for the movement of this plane. And it's going straight down, and it takes it 45 minutes to get from about a 60-degree angle with the horizon to maybe a 15-degree. And by the time it gets to that 15-degree, after 45 minutes, it changes into a classic UFO. And I've got those timed exposures on film with the negatives. And I had that online back about 10 years ago, and they're not there anymore, but I've got to find them, and I'll put them up again. I've talked to Kevin about it and you, but I've got those, and I mean it. What do you say to something like that?
I'm kind of speechless, because right now I'm looking at a question that was thrown to me by a friend about one of your ancestors. Anton Horak, I believe is his name.
Yep.
He discovered a moon shaft?
Yep.
Would you share some of that with us?
Well, he was my great uncle, and I didn't meet him until I was almost 17. I had met my father, and so I was going into the Navy, and so I drove up. They lived in Aurora, Colorado, and while I stayed there at my father's house for a while, and Tony and Anna, his wife, came and visited, and I met him, and we got to talking, and he started telling me, and he had brought some of his papers with him, and when we were alone, he got some things out, because he believed that what he had found was otherworldly. He didn't want to discuss that with anybody else, not even Anna. So he was telling me, he said, are you open to this? He kept saying that, are you open to this? And, but he was a very well-educated man. The family had an estate that had 3 mountains on it. And, of course, the Germans, when they occupied, they put him and Anna in a work camp because he wouldn't cooperate. He wouldn't run the mines for them. These mountains were rich in rare earths. Madame Curie, he told me that Madame Curie took her first radium sample from one of his mines. And when he came over, after World War II and the Russians, the Soviets took over, they were impressed with the fact that he had been in the resistance. So they said, you can stay here and run the mines for us, or you can leave with anything you can take with you. So he took all kinds of stuff. When he first got to the United States, he went to Denver, and he opened a nice restaurant and then had some lawyers backing him. But he furnished them with a lot of the things that he took from the estate. And so they cheated him. They set him up, and they cheated him out of all those. There were some valuable things. So he ended up in Pueblo and opened up a little restaurant there. But he had come up, and, of course, he and Anna spent holidays with my father and his wife, and they were close. When I left to go to California to go into the Navy, he and Anna saw me off, and he would write to me and admonish me like the old European parents admonish their young. I've got some of his letters. But he had already published that article, and he told me about Dr. Hynek coming to visit him and asking him about that article and what he knew. And there were things he didn't even talk about to anybody. After I kept telling him, yeah, my mind is open, he told me some things I don't think he told other people. He was a real deal. He had doctorate degrees in mining engineering and in linguistics.
What can you tell us about this moon shaft?
Well, they found it. I get inside information, and I promise not to discuss certain things, but they found it. And it's one of those things that after they found it, they had to stop and wait for this jerk who is Illuminati and Bilderberger. And this is what he does to come and make sure there's nothing too compelling for any, that engine is not the only thing in that cave.
But what's interesting is the way the Bilderbergers, or the whatever you want to call them, the monkeys that do the same thing over and over again and think that's the way to control.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that they do that they go in and they take out things that show any kind of history. Well,
they know something about the last lineage, and they know that their way of thinking caused an end, caused that lineage to die. They know that what they did, and they don't want anybody else to know, but they don't know any other way to be.
And there's another question came out of the chat room. What else is in the cave? And I don't think you can say anything more about that.
I'm going to say it. I said I wouldn't keep any secrets. Gold.
Gold. How much gold?
A lot of it.
Kind of history.
And they can't touch it. Oh, that must give them sleepless nights.
All right, here's another question for you. What do you mean by the engine?
Uplift pushed this engine up. It looks like a church spire, only it's 1,200 feet long. And it's made from something that, if you look at it, it looks like more like stone than metal. But it's impervious. And it's been pushed up from just above the mantle by uplift. Now, after it was pushed up, this cave became something of a holy place for the locals. And eventually it became a hiding place for secreting things. But in the front of the cave is a grotto, shaped like a half moon.
And what's that for?
Well, that indicates that some rather erudite Turks at one time, during their crusade against the East Europeans, knew more about that than the locals, and were worshipful.
But I have another question for you if you're ready to change subjects.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the loud rumbling noises being heard all across the states?
You mean all across the world?
Yeah, that too.
They're testing a sound weapon.
That does not surprise me. I guess they're really getting ready for this big false flag UFO alien invasion, aren't they?
No, this is to depopulate.
So they're not happy with the vaccines. They're not happy with the food that's genetically modified that has no nutrients in it. They're not happy with the drugs that'll kill you. They're not happy with the corn that'll sterilize you. So now they're going to use sound weapons to kill people.
Sound is the most lethal weapon there is. You get your harmonics near the frequency of thought, and you shut a person down. And you don't have to do it through the air. You can do beat frequency through walls, the vibration. It's an insidious, we know that pests are killed that way. And, every animal has a different set frequency of thought. So it's a matter of harmonics being used to create a very deadly weapon.
That's scary, but not surprising if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, you have to understand that they have all kinds of means of harming and of devastating and everything, and very little remedial technology or what. There's a mineral, and it is unique to Nevada, that can turn all the contamination and the Corexit that's been used in the Gulf and return everything to a balance. Can't grow the coral. It'll take thousands of years to get the coral back, and that's part of the saltwater environment. But nonetheless, clean it up the Corexit and clean up contamination. It can even render, if you take these microbes that go around these underwater vents, volcano vents in the sea, you take those and you culture them in a petri dish with this mineral, they can ingest plutonium waste and render it harmless. You've got technologies, and there are people that have figured out different methods of using energy to do very much the same thing. The answers are there, but they don't want these developed until they have depopulated the earth and 95% of us. And then they think they'll spring up out of the ground where they've been hiding. But like I say, go to your holes in the ground where you'll die like the rats you are. I say that over and over again because I know that that's going to happen.
All right, there's a comment from the chat room. Could it be that all these underground cities all across the globe are built for the populace to take cover during our time of going through the photon belt?
Well, they're supposed to convince the elite that they have a place to run to or whatever, but they don't. They knew a long time ago that those things were inadequate, so they were planning on bases on Mars, and that didn't work. So now they're concentrating on these underground cities, and they're not going to work for various reasons. The people that are implementing, the technical people, the scientists, engineers, and so forth, know this. They just don't share it with the elite because then their paychecks would stop. So do some of the military. They have their own agenda. And, who needs the elite once you got your hands on the weapons of... You got to figure, that everybody's being sold a bill of goods. And the people that intend to survive, they're going to go too. I mean, there's no way out of this once they start it. There's no way out of it. You'd think with all those records they've suppressed, they'd have read a few of them.
You would have thought that.
Yeah.
There's an interesting question. Is there anything that you know of that can protect one against the sound weapons?
Yeah. Good question, and I'll tell you what it is. It's a double-core ear protector that ears. This corporation is just called Ears. They have a section, they make these for the military. You can order these. You can get a device that'll detect low-frequency sound that is of an amplitude that's harmful. It'll detect it for you. You turn it on. If you see red, then you need to put those things in. But it's a double-core ear protector, and what it does is by the time the sound gets to the inner ear, it's been changed frequency-wise.
Is that ears.com?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I bought it. You get the little device, the detector, and the earplugs cost you $50. Now, you can probably, if you're in a pinch, you can probably take shooters, ear protectors that go completely over the ear, and get a set that go inside the ear and wear them both. That might do it, but I know the double core are made for this weapon that they've got. They have two range weapons. One is for crowd control, and the other one's to kill. You won't see that until they actually start, if they do. Big mistake. It'll be a big mistake.
Is that in Memphis, Tennessee?
I've got one of their receipts because I ordered those. I've got them right around here somewhere.
Because I ended up at the Shea Center for Ears, Hearing, and Balance.
No, doesn't sound like it. Of course, they could have changed. I bought mine a couple of months ago. So let's see if I can probably bookmarked it. I'll check.
Shea the third MD.
That doesn't ring a bell.
I think what happened is they have taken the site down.
Could have. I kind of expected them to. That's why I told all my friends to get them. Well, they could, but you know, if I'd had the money at the time, I'd have bought about 10 sets of those and given them for Christmas.
Well, I have some pretty good shooter's ears. And my animals are pretty good about detecting low-frequency sounds.
Okay, now, if you start to feel that it's coming through the walls or the beat frequency that can come to you by vibration, take one hand and grab the top of the other one and take your forefinger and tap on your wrist. That'll defeat that vibration weapon. It's a sound weapon, but it hits and is carried to the heart by the bones. Comes through, and it can match, when it comes through, it can match the frequency of thought, which just shuts down everything. These are weapons. These are god-awful weapons, and I wrote a canto 12 years ago about this being the ultimate weapon that they would use.
One of my hosts has his show here on Wednesday, put a comment in, but the holes or cities in the ground aren't likely to do squat the next time the Earth poles shift, because there's going to be a whole lot of shaking be going on.
Well, that's not all. There are other things, too. I don't want to share that with the powers that be.
Good enough for me.
I really don't want to share it with them, because what they intend to do makes them animals. I don't consider them any more than that. You know, I talk about the soul and the spirit of everybody being perfectible, and it is. They'll go where you go. But they have destroyed themselves as human beings, and they've bought into some of the most god-awful mindsets. I mean, they make a vampire or a werewolf, the legends of these, look like a child's book. What they're doing is 10 times more monstrous than anything that could be conceived in fiction. The way that they have allowed the worst elements of humanity to practice experiments and to do the things that they've done is unforgivable. It'd be better off if they had never existed. And I don't say that lightly.
Like I say, I can't express my appreciation, and we're not done yet, but I just got to say this now. I cannot express my appreciation enough for you taking the time out of your busy day to come on my little radio station and talk with me, and in my conversation with James C. Horak.
Well, it's my pleasure, my privilege. I feel a lot better vetting this. There are things that I went most of my life keeping all this in me. And I've known people that were on the inside. One of them was not from here. He had inherited a family. He had fame, regard. He had been kicking around this planet for an awfully long time. And he regretted having gone along with things that have led to this now. And he died in the early 80s. And he was an interesting person. I think about him from time to time. I think he would have done things differently if he had been sure, like me, what was going to happen. You cannot bring yourself to believe that people like you can be capable of these creatures. I call them monsters. You know, normally I'd never do that. Normally a sentient being is a sentient being. But these have lost their humanity.
Yeah, no fooling.
Yeah.
I put something in a chat with you and I, James. If you take a look at it.
Yeah.
That is from a very, very experienced and knowledgeable friend of mine who's also a host here on Little Spirit Radio. Okay, folks, I'm going to read this. You want to know how to create earphones like that at home? You have to cover the far back of your ear where the ear bone is, so take the shooter's ears and place several different thicknesses of plastic wrap behind the foam that's in the shooter's ears. That will cause the frequencies to modulate at a higher or lower rate.
Yeah.
It will
That'll
also
work.
keep the harmonic oscillation from occurring. Be careful, though, because if you block out all sounds, it will drive you nuts within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
See, folks, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's 1,000 ways we're going to beat these people because...
I had suspected the noises that we had heard the first time that I had listened to them over the internet. But about, I'd say a week ago, we got them here. And it was between an international airport, DFW, and where I live. And I went out, and I am positive that it was a sound weapon. So on that basis, I couldn't tell hearing it over the internet or hearing it over a second transmission, but hearing it at first transmission, this is a sound weapon. Now, all they have to do is move that frequency attenuator up in the range of thought, and they kill people.
Here's another way. Think about the design of the helmets that the police and military wear, the SWAT teams, and you build one just like it.
Yeah, well, you can get them. You can get them. You can buy them through some of the gun stores, catalogs. One of them is cheaper than dirt. I don't know if Cabela's has them. Now, these that you can buy are not bulletproof. If you get a full jacketed bullet coming at your head, it'll go into that thing. But they will protect you. You know, you can use them to protect yourself from sound weapons and stuff like that. They would be handy for that. But to get any real helmet that like they have, it's going to cost you probably at least $250 or $300. And I haven't seen any of them that are for sale. I think what they're doing is making it difficult to find them. But you can get body armor, and you can get whatever you want, really. If you will pay a small amount of money, you can get a silencer, you can get stuff you wouldn't believe. And you can get a BMG. You can buy stuff, that I wouldn't want. Most Americans are not going to go for gun control. And they're buying guns and ammo left and right. And they have now for the last 3 years.
That's true. And whenever Obama was, quote, reelected, it was interesting that gun sales went up astronomically.
There are a lot of people that went along with gun control, and, I hate to see a woman going along with gun control because women need guns more than anybody.
Yep.
And I used to teach women out at I belong to a NRA-sanctioned rifle and pistol club, and I would teach defense to women with a gun. And they would bring their friends along who were, they didn't know for sure about this sort of thing. And I'd explain to them, I'd say, you're alone at night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Somebody is breaking in. Now, between the time they get to you and you hear them breaking in, you're going to live a lifetime of horror that you won't live if you can reach down and pull a gun out of the vestibule. And all you have to do is shoot it and they'll leave. Or you can blast them. But it'll protect you.
The best one I heard was there was a girl, I think it was 13, was a clay shooting champion. And 2 guys broke into her house one night, in their house, and she was there by herself because her parents were out. And she calmly took a rifle, sort of hid by the steps, and when they came up the steps, she shot both of them because they were both carrying guns. One made it outside before he died.
They didn't have to be carrying anything. If they were in that house and she was alone, they'll know Bill just about anywhere in this country, or if they don't, they're out of their mind, because a woman has a right to defend herself against intruders any way she sees fit.
I absolutely agree with that. But it was
If
interesting.
I had a daughter or a wife, I'd be pissed off at them if they didn't.
Thank you.
Well, you know, Hillary Clinton is the force behind gun control, and she went to the UN and negotiated a treaty that has no legality in terms of constitutional law whatsoever. In fact, she should be tried as a traitor for negotiating with a foreign power without the consent of Congress.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And, you know, I would volunteer to arrest her and put her in jail. They'd give me the authority to. I would love to.
Can I help you?
Yes. Could we use one of your wolves to kind of snarl at her?
Oh.
Get her in the right frame of mind.
You betcha.
Do you know how that woman came into prominence politically?
I shudder to think.
She worked for a law firm that did free law for the Black Panthers. Now, this was not people that were actually good, decent people working for their race. These were criminals, rob banks and kill people. And she defended them because it confuses the line between people fighting for social justice and rank criminals hiding behind that facade.
Like politicians.
Like politicians, yeah. We got one here in Dallas. He is his own mob, black mob, and he gets away with that kind of thing.
Got to be a special place in hell reserved for people like that.
Well, I've thought about that. There's no hell. There, you know, the spirit is perfectible. And so after death, you're not going to get any punitive measures taken against the spirit.
Darn.
I mean, earthbound humanity has got that just bred into them, and it's funny, but, you know, on one hand, you believe in the immortality of the spirit, in the perfectibility of the spirit, and you want to see it boiling in a lake of fire or whatever, brimstone, and you know, that just doesn't wash. I'm sorry, but it doesn't wash.
Well, it's more a habit for me saying that than what I know in reality.
Yeah. Well, I know. I think most people know that that's something to frighten children with, and to frighten people that other people are afraid might be worse if they didn't have the fear of hell and hellfire. But I don't believe that. I don't think it helps anybody. I think that it's an error to look on God as personality, you know.
I can understand that.
Yeah, I believe in God, but I don't believe in a personality that is God. I believe that that is an arrogance that we have, and whoever is responsible for those lines that we are made in his likeness or whatever, I think that's blasphemy. I think blasphemy is to speak for God, not to say God damn or whatever. I mean, we'd have a whole race of English men going to hell if that was true, wouldn't we? I wonder how many times a good Englishman says goddamn. Don't you?
Yeah, and every once in a while it slips out here.
Do you know what, in the Middle Ages, what the French called the English?
No.
Goddams, because they always said goddamn. That's what they called them. Yeah.
Oh, James, this has been most delightful for me. I hope it was for the people out there.
I would say that we've got something great to look forward to in the 21st. And let's not let the monsters rob us of that time and pleasure. And, you know, if they know that we're wise, they're not going to do anything. They're going to sit there and hope it doesn't happen. Well, you know, I expect things like that, and you don't know. It's going to affect everyone differently, but it's going to be good for everyone. You know, it'll be a long time before it happens again. It might be what we need.
That is the best thing I've heard so far. It might be what we need, because I'm going to put it to you this way. It's all going to be what you choose to make it.
That's right. That's right.
And I choose to make it fun. They can go fly a kite in a rainstorm.
I'll tell you something. Your wolves are going to sense it.
Oh, believe me, they're sensing something already. The sun's going to come up tomorrow morning no matter what Dave Corso thinks or what my friend James Horak tells me it's going to do, but it's going to come up no matter what.
Well, you can count on that. You can certainly count on that. And, you know, anybody that's afraid of the sun is afraid of their shadow.
I'm not afraid of my shadow. It gives me a good kick in the butt every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, the sun is the giver of life. It gives us more than it takes. Now, one of my friends said that you probably meant underground sounds that have been heard recently. If that's what the gentleman was asking about, those are those tunnel machines. They sound like there are two sounds that give those away. These machines are on rails. So when they are through, they draw them out. And you can hear that squeal on those rails, like when a train is slowing or just starts out from a stop. You hear this moan. The sound that you hear of these tunneling machines sounds like one of these tankers, one of these refuel tankers, airplanes, that burning off excess fuel. They have a roar of the jet engines. That's what these tunnel machines sound like when they're tunneling. Now, when they withdraw them, after you hear this noise die down, if you hear this screeching on that rail, that's what that is for sure. We have most of Dallas and Fort Worth is honeycombed with these tunnels.
And 7 years ago, there's a mountain range that sits to the west of Pahrump. We'd hear blasting going on in there. So someone called the county, called the state, called the government, and they said, we don't have any knowledge of that.
Let me tell you, there are so many places that are anomalous, not just with sounds, but look out off in the distance and see places. And there was one guy who tried to find this one area because he saw something highly anomalous there. And so he made a video of his hunt for this area. And this was on one of the shows. And finally, he got to a road that went straight to it. But he was driving a van, and the road became very hazardous. And since that was his only means of transportation, he turned around and went back. But he had already gone past a cattle guard that had a U.S. government sign on it. And what he was talking about, what he had seen, looked like a UFO. I've seen some weird stuff at the Carswell Air Force Base back when it was Carswell Air Force Base. Today it's a Joint Navy Air Force Base. But Carswell here in Fort Worth is where they brought the parts of the craft from Roswell.
And it's interesting, they supposedly put it into a B-29. Yeah.
Well, you know about the flap here in Texas down near Dublin and Stephenville. I grew up in Dublin. And Dublin is about 80 miles south of Fort Worth, southwest. And this flap was sensational. It's still going on. What's behind that flap is very interesting. What I know about a ultimate weapon and its delivery system that is tunneled in from Fort Worth all the way down to Stephenville.
All right, I'm going to bring Tom Hughes in for a bit. He's one of my hosts. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, you brought me in.
Say hello to James.
Hi, James.
Hello, Thomas. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the weather here in Texas right now.
Are you in Texas?
I'm down near College Station area.
Oh, are you an Aggie?
No, but growing up, I was traumatized quite a bit by those wonderful patrons of the educational system. I'm sorry, James. Did you realize I was crazy?
I don't think you're crazy.
Well, I've seen Sasquatch. That makes me crazy.
Yeah. Well, I know Sasquatch exists, and they're very shy, and I've known a lot of people who I respect their integrity, and they've seen them. There's a place in Utah where they see them quite a bit.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know. What I can say, James, is that my family has 900 acres just down the road here. And that's where my experiences took place at. There's a whole lot of things that go with that. I won't go into it right now. But I'm 6 feet 7 inches tall. And growing up in this body and living in this life, I never imagined that I would see a man one day that could literally call me midget. But I have. That was fun.
You must have seen a blonde.
No, he was red, and he's got some dark spots on his back. He's somewhere between 11 and 12 feet tall. And
Really?
I've seen him I saw him in the daylight. And I have witnesses to this for his footprint size anyway, because we measured his footprint from big toe to heel, and it was 21 inches long.
I used to know a fella whose folks owned Comanche Peak.
Okay.
And they claimed that they had seen Sasquatch up there. But, of course, that area is pretty well, they keep people out of there, and, of course, it's close to that reactor there in Granbury.
Yeah.
That's an old Indian site, and they've tried to keep it as pristine as they can. They invite people up there, but they don't let them take any of the things that they come across. There are village sites up there that you can plainly see were once Indian villages.
Yeah. Well, again, I never imagined in this life that I would run across anything like that. But in 2008, I was done. And I said it out loud. I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. And then I opened my mouth and inserted my foot and said the word but. If you want me to stick around for any number of reasons, you have to give me at least one reason to get up every day. And it was 2 months later I saw a Sasquatch female in person just 50 feet away from me. So
You saw a female?
Yes, I did. 50 feet away.
They must have meant for you to see them.
Well, I look back and I curse myself all the time because I was the one that had to say the word but. If I hadn't said the word but, I'd be off this train by now. But no, I had to say the word but. So the next morning when I got up, I thought, well, there's a reason to get up every day. Okay, I'll stick around for a while. And I'm still here.
Well, you know, nobody's ever been harmed by one of these guys.
No.
They're very shy.
I see he's never met to look.
Well, they only show their sense of humor once they know you, and then they start harassing you.
They've harassed you?
Oh, yeah.
They have a sense of humor like you wouldn't believe, James.
James, let me tell you a joke that a Sasquatch told me. Okay? You know, these Bigfoot researchers are out there tree knocking for the last few years because they finally figured out that tree knocking is a form of communication between the Sasquatch people. So they started tree knocking. The problem is, they don't have any idea what they're saying. So, I had a large fella come into my head one morning as I'm sitting here drinking coffee, and I said, what do you want? And he said, joke for you. And I said, hey, it's too early in the morning. I don't want to hear a joke. Too bad. You're here anyway. I'm like, fine. What's your joke? And he said, I say knock knock, you say who there. I said, fine. He said, knock knock. I said, who's there? Knock knock. I said, who's there? Knock knock. I said, who's there? He said, knock knock. I said, how long is this going to go on for? And he said, how do you like it? Which is exactly the way the Bigfoot researchers are doing it. They're knocking on trees. The Sasquatch are responding back saying, who's there? And they just keep knocking, knock knock.
Let me share one with you, James. To look is a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or a blurry folk or a first folk, whatever you want to call them, that is friends with my Mustang Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse is a small Mustang. To look is about, 11 feet tall, Tom?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
One night, I get this feeling I should go out. So I walked out, turned on the spotlights that point over toward the wolf's cage, and all of a sudden, I looked over at Crazy Horse, and I could see there's a little light behind him. It's a security light. And I thought, how did Crazy Horse suddenly get that white? I said, "Look, are you out there?" And he turns to me, and I see his eyes reflecting in the light. And he said, "What you want?" I said, "One day I want to shake your hand because I am your friend." He said, "Where's the treats?" And then he snickered. Well, at that time, the treat box was up at 11 feet. I had it moved down to 6 feet because my son doesn't allow me to use a ladder. So I can reach up into it and put the treats in there. And I still got to take the treats out. But so I've been asking Crazy Horse, when's To Look coming back? And all he says is he's busy. And I think right now, all the Sasquatch are busy. Wouldn't you say so, Tom?
I know they are.
Well, they're going to sense this, what's coming between now and the 21st.
Oh, yeah. They've been busy for a while now. And I've had to put up with their quirky humor all along. Great. The woman in Australia, near Alice Springs, Australia, here about 5 months ago, that was fun. Because I was describing a place to her where she goes in Australia, and I've never even been there. And she asked me over Skype, she goes, "Are you sure you've never been to Australia before?" And I said, "No, I've never been there. I don't know what anything is." She goes, "Well, how are you able to tell me all this?" And I said, "Because there's Yowie right there in that area that are showing me through their eyes and letting me see all this." I said, "What I want to make you aware of is that they're working in that area because they hear the calling of the land too. And so it would behoove you to go into an agreement with them so that you can work together instead of against each other." She thought I was going to be upset when she opened the dialogue with the Aborigine elders in that area, and I was just ecstatic. I was like, "Go, good. Why would I be upset? You're talking with people that know more about the land than I do." But I was communicating with a male and 2 female Yowies all the way over there in Alice Springs, Australia. And James, if you know anybody with a straitjacket in a river room that'll just dish it out for free, please let me know, because I've been trying to get into one of those for a while now, and they won't let me in.
I don't think one would fit you. You're just too big. I don't know that they make them for people your size.
We live for those moments because you can't even pay real money to go and see those kind of things. You just have to be there.
Well, I used to read to people that were survivors from the Philadelphia experiment. They're up on the 7th floor of the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. That's why I think they flew me across. See, I was in the West Pacific. I was in the Pacific. They flew me from Long Beach in a private jet, landed in a private airfield. They came out in a limousine, picked me up, took me to the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. I had an interesting time in the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. They brought a lady psychiatrist out of retirement, Captain Willoughby, the only woman at that point that had ever been offered an admiralty. She had been one of FDR's psychiatrists. Only talked with her twice, and the first time she wanted to know about those lights, Sasquatch Harbor. And I said, "Well, I must have been hallucinating because they were doing things they shouldn't do. And I can't do, so I must have been hallucinating." She liked that. and then, whenever I was being discharged, when I was being separated, I was separated from the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. Given a medical discharge.
I'm going to ask you a question, pardon me, James. What did you do to get stuck in the Philadelphia Naval Hospital?
UFO incident aboard the USS Kennebec just before Christmas in 1962 in Sasquatch Harbor, Japan.
What were the lights doing that they shouldn't have been doing?
There were UFOs. Came over the mountains and came out from sea, formed a V. It was about after 2 o'clock in the morning. And we'd been working all night. All the previous day hadn't eaten anything. They called off work, left me to put all the gear in the gear locker, and I was on the well deck of this tanker. And I went to the rail to see what the hell was going on, and I knew. What I didn't know is that there were still some crewmen to see what happened. So after what happened, I passed out. And when I came to, the chief hospital corpsman was over me and said, let's go up to the sick bay. And I get up, and he takes me up to sick bay, gives me a sedative. It's already close to reveille. And reveille blows. I jump out of my rack and hit the deck and pass out. I haven't eaten anything in 48 hours and given a sedative 2 hours earlier and no sleep. What do you expect? Take me over to the shore, to infirmary, and there they say, well, we're not going to put you back on that ship. We wouldn't send a dog back on that ship. We're sending you to Akuska. So sent me to Akuska, and then the fun began. Want to know anything else? No secrets. Tell you exactly.
Absolutely not.
But when I was going to school up in Michigan, they had just started increasing the underground complex out at Carswell. You guys have seen that underground tunnel machine, right? Seen the one with the nuclear reactor and that superheats the screw and so forth? You've seen pictures of that, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
It's got the Air Force emblem on it?
Yes.
Well, that was at Carswell when that picture was taken. I got this from the inside. This was back in 78. No, it was even earlier than that. But they had decided that they were going to increase the underground installation there. It's an Iron Mountain installation. And so they were going to tunnel under the lake and go all the way up to where this old Army Air Corps base used to be, which is now Kenneth Copeland's property. So they were going to do that, and then they were going to connect up with a series of tunnels, go all the way up to Carlsbad. And Carlsbad can reach California, that series of tunnels. So they scared something out of the deep underground area, and this thing looks like it's quite huge. It has a long neck, kind of like a giraffe, but not quite that long. Has a face like a goat, and can throw a mounted truck tire 100 feet in the air. And I talked to the kids. When I came back down here, I was very interested, and it was just about 7 or 8 months after this incident had happened. These kids were walking down this little road down towards the lake and saw this thing coming up towards them. And, of course, scared the hell out of them, and this thing did not want anybody messing with it, so it picked up this tire. And it threw it 100 feet or more, and didn't throw it at them, but just to kind of scare them. And this was in the paper, and then here recently, back when it happened, and then here recently, they did a revisit of that story, and showed the artist's conception based on what these kids saw. And people had seen it too. So they called it the Goat Island Monster. And this thing will knock you over. You don't I can't imagine this damn thing. But I think they disturbed him, and he was pissed off. And he came out and raised hell for a little while, and then went back in. Didn't hurt anybody.
What's interesting about the Sasquatch is they won't harm you.
No. Neither would this guy either. He didn't harm anybody.
I used to go hunting up in Pennsylvania when I was a kid. And I'd go tropping off through the woods and never thought a thing about it. And I just have to wonder how many times I had a protector and didn't know it.
You're safer out there. I prospected every summer, and I went places where I saw things all over Colorado, all over Utah, and I saw things that defy description. But it's not because that I was a specially gifted observer or anything. It's because I can see what's in front of me. You got people that when they see this thing, they go on no, and they have a psychic block to realizing it because they're not prepared. to see it so they don't. And more people have psychic blocks to this sort of thing than don't.
Oh, I can believe that.
Oh, yeah. Look, I've been out so many times, and I see it, and I say, see that? And they say, what? I don't see anything. And then I start describing it, and then they wake up and see it.
They're doing everything they can to rub our nose in it. They really are.
Well, a lot of this, you're right. Most people, if they see something like this, and it's not resolved for them, go into a panic state. It's kind of like shock. And they can get to where they don't believe anything they see. It's incredulity, and it's typical of Earth-based humanity. You can see it in fundamentalists, whether they're Christian or otherwise. They will tell you, well, I believe it's either God or it's the devil. So if they can't resolve it, it's the devil. I've got a neighbor that says that shit to me.
It's interesting because one afternoon there was a bunch of us standing around after a meeting of some sort. And there was this white unmarked plane spraying a big heavy chemtrail up about maybe 30,000 feet. And we watched it when it came over the horizon. It was spraying. When it went over the horizon to the northwest, it was still spraying. One of the guys says, wonder what kind of plane that was. I said, that's a chemtrail, not a contrail. And this one moron said, that's a contrail. I spent 30 years in the Air Force and I know. And I said, when did you get out? Well, I got out 20 years ago. I said, they weren't spraying 20 years. That is a chemtrail. Look at the way it migrates. Contrails don't do that. Do your research. I don't have to. I'm an Air Force veteran. One of the guys says, why don't you get the hell out of here then, because you're dumb. And the other five guys just roared. He got on his old beat-up Cadillac and left.
Well, that's what you have. It's sad to say, but we live in a society that has made denial fashionable. There are people that are proud of being ignorant. Now, Thomas knows what I'm talking about. There are quite a few of them here in Texas, aren't there?
Oh, more than you could shake a stick at.
Well, I think that bureaucracy does not justify itself, and it is a subterfuge for small minds that have illusions of power over others that are unwarranted. And they hide behind their upper echelons who are supposed to send them out to perform whatever duty, and they take license for power, for a power trip. And it's just typical. I mean, who but a very damaged person would want to be in a job like that? I mean, it's just petty bureaucrats, about as low down on the totem pole as you can be. I have more respect for people that pick up your garbage than I have for petty bureaucrats, because people that pick up your garbage are doing an honest job. They're doing work. They're doing something to make a difference. But these petty bureaucrats, I swear to God, and everything's your fault. I mean, they can be so removed from any kind of standard or decency. They don't get paid that much to sell their soul for peanuts. And I'm thinking, you know, if I was a violent man, you'd be going home with a bump on your head right now. Sometimes I think that violent people are people that just have a healthy sense of outrage that's bigger than their patience.
What an apt description.
Then I had another run-in with them over this mineral. I wanted to get this mineral approved so that it could be sold in Texas. I didn't have $50,000 to pay the bastards, the corrupt bastards, so I could get this mineral approved to be sold in Texas. A&M is full of the biggest, you know, Baylor and A&M are the most corrupt, most decadent, and most satanic filled. I mean, I doubt if anybody can get a job and get tenure at any of those schools that isn't into Satanism. And, you know, I'm not exaggerating. I'm exaggerating a little, but I'm not exaggerating that much. Have you ever heard about the scandals at Baylor?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They had a jock on a football team kill his buddy, and they tried to cover for him, and it came out that this kid was a mental case, Should never have been on the football team. But he could run.
That's all they cared about.
They tried to sweep that under the rug, you know. Just remember, wacko is wacko. You know that there are two, in the Southwest, there are two big FEMA camps. Wacko is one, and the other is Oklahoma City.
Oh, well, that's where we'll send all of them when we're done with this time that we're going through. They get to enjoy the resorts that they made for us.
Yeah. At least we won't use the coffins on them. Won't
That's right.
kill any. But we'll let them live there for a couple of years. Maybe we can refine them to where they will retain enough human decency to offer some service to society.
Yeah.
I don't think you could get into FEMA if you had a heart or soul that was working. You know, I think a lot of people just firmly do not believe in their souls. They do not believe in compassion or empathy or any of those things, and they put it in a dormant state. Because, I mean, how can they do the things they do? How can they say the things that they say about people? I mean, who in their right mind calls other people useless eaters? That's what the powers that be call us. Useless eaters.
I got news for them. Something for them to think about. How about you being a useless boss? Because if you think we're useless, what do you think you are?
Well, they don't think. They don't think. I mean, look at the Queen of England. She is the worst baggage on earth. And, you know, I'd like to hear one good reason why that creature should be sitting on a throne ordering people killed. And I have no doubt that this nurse that recently was found hanged was killed by order of the Queen because she was pissed off that she didn't follow strict protocol with passing a phone call on to the ward that her daughter-in-law was in being examined for pregnancy. You know, man, that's cold. That is really cold. I have no doubt she did.
Well, after discussing that, I think there's only one question left to ask for everyone. We've all seen the amazing things that can be done with electrons, protons, and neutrons. And the only question left to ask is, why are we still following morons?
Well, you know, for every person that is wise, there are 25 brothers and sisters he needs to pull along and get up to speed to realize their best self-interest. We're not our brothers' keepers. We're our brothers and sisters' draggers. Dragging them along, you know. Put your nose in this. Solid. It's shit. You see? It's not chocolate pudding. It's shit.
You have such a remarkable way with words. You fit right in, James.
Can't you figure out a way to get me a young wolf?
If you see a wolf in the wild, it's because that wolf wanted you to see him.
That's right. I agree. The same is true with the Sasquatch.
Oh, that's true.
Well, I'll let you go, my friend.
And James, thank you again. And until then, our love, our light, and our blessings to you. And thank you, James.
Thank you, Dave. Good night.